So pray before we start. The Father which art in heaven, we're very grateful for us to be in this sanctuary. Bless this time together and open our eyes, open our heart, so we can see the beauty of your character. For Christ's sake, amen. Today I want to give you a sermon. It's called Rejoice Always. Remember? Rejoice always. Next question, how do you do it? It's a very difficult question. Philippians 4:4 says, rejoice in the Lord always. Keyword, always, right here, always. And I will say it again, rejoice. 4:4, it really troubled me. Does it trouble you? Rejoice, that's okay. In the Lord always. He said, let me ask you a question. Because I always ask a question, then I start asking. I learn something. Rejoice always, that's 1 Thessalonians 5:16. That's the background. Just think about it. When you have a car wreck, can you rejoice always in the car wreck? No. You're really distressed. You're really depressed because you have to pay the bills and so forth. But think about it. Give thanks in the car wreck for not being killed or hurt. Think about this one. When you have a sickness, like a nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, bleeding, and you cannot rejoice in the sickness, but give thanks for the doctor who can diagnose and give you treatment. When you're persecuted, right here, you cannot give a thanks always in the middle of the persecution. But think about it this way. Give thanks for God's protection. Use these hardships for the eternal salvation. God can make the best out of this situation for someone else's salvation. Think about it this way. Look at the reformers. Number one, John Wycliffe, John Huss, Martin Luther, and then their influence for the next generation. Think about it. They went through hardships, tough time, but look at the influence that they left for the generations to come. Let me give this is the correct question. What is the chance for being dead in the car wreck? Do you know anybody? Let me give you the flip side. 1 out of 107, 1 out of 107 a car wreck, that means about 0.93%, less than 1%, you walk away. Say you're dead. That means almost 99% of the time, you're fine. That's good. What is the lifelong odds of dying in a car wreck? The answer is 1 out of 107. Now think about this one. This is I give two cases. About this lady, a 37-year-old female, came to me, and she said, Dr. Namhira, I'm really hurting. So she had a surgery in arm, and she was crying, and she was depressed. And said that she was involved with a car accident, and then injured it was the right arm, and it was bruised. It's a really bad situation. So she was airlifted from Vicksburg, Mississippi to Jackson, Mississippi. So she was admitted to UMMC, Jackson, Mississippi. So she underwent two surgeries. And she came back to me. Like, my arm hurts, and then I cannot sleep. And so she was very depressed. And then I listened to her for a moment and said, well, what shall I tell her? So under the circumstance, I looked at her situation and said, well, lady, let's look at it this way. What is the chance of being dead? We call DOA, dead on arrival. He said, well, I don't know. And then I shared the statistics. I said, 1 out of 107, meaning you're very lucky. And then I asked her this question. How about if you think of it this way? You're sitting here in that chair and say, oh, Dr. Namhira, my arm hurts, and then I'm really miserable, I'm sad, I'm crying. So I asked this question. How about if you look this way? Look at yourself now, and then you are above the ground. And say, she was very shocked. So above the ground, you're walking around, but on the other hand, you are not under the ground, you are not buried. And then she got the point. She finally got the point and said, yep, you have a pain and suffering, and pain and suffering is a part of a life. And said, yep. And then when I mentioned to her and said, how about if you look at it this way? You walked out of the accident site. You're walking above the ground, not buried underneath the ground. So she got the point and said, so I told her and said, how about you do this? How about writing everything that you are thankful for it's called the gratitude journal, what you are very thankful for, and then just bring it to me when you come next time. So she was very shocked and said, okay, I will. And when she left, she opened her eyes and said, okay, I will. Next situation, this is a very sad situation. It happened at home, and this was a 65-year-old patient. He's not going to hear. I'm depressed. And say, oh, what's going on? Well, what's wrong with you? He said, I'm sad. I'm mad. And say, okay. So situation getting worse. And say, so tell me what's happening. And so I always listen to the patient first and say, tell me what's in your heart. What's really bothering you? And say, well. And then the story goes and say, I have a daughter, and the daughter has a girl. That means it's a grandchild of this patient. And my daughter and my grandchild were killed at home by her boyfriend. And I said, so I was silent. I didn't have any words to say, and I was very quiet. Next question is, how do you advise the patient or someone who is in distress, depressed and sad and mad, what to do next? Can you ask a question? Can you tell the patient, rejoice always? Sounds really bad. Doesn't fit into the situation. Not everything in life is equal in this world. Bad things happen to good people, law-abiding and sincere people. That's true. Just because you're sincere and good and faithful doesn't mean you're exempt from the trauma and accident and tragedy. It's very important. Bad things happen to good people, law-abiding, sincere people. This is a real tough question. Then, ask a question. Can you tell those two ladies that I mentioned to you, it was a lady, can you tell them, well, Miss So-and-so, so Bible said, 1 Thessalonians 5:16 say, Bible said, rejoice always. Does it resonate in your heart? No. They will be more mad at you. So there is a time and place. That really hit me and said, Bible said, rejoice always. Really? Is that really true? How do you do it? If it's true, how do you do it? So let's stay in tune. Question. Rejoice always. How do you do it? It is a very pertinent question to all of us, applied to us. And then when we examine this issue, and then we'll find out what is the Bible answer to the question. Okay? Let's look at that chapter 4, 1 Thessalonians 5. If you read this chapter, there's about 10 things, but I'm going to focus on the 2 things for the sake of time. The Apostle Paul's recommendation to Thessalonians, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10. But I'm going to focus on the 5 and 7. On the item number 5, Apostle Paul said, be joyful, meaning not be depressed at all times, meaning rejoice always, is the 5:16. And then on the 5:18, it's constant thanksgiving, meaning give thanks in everything. Rejoice, joyful, and thanksgiving goes something going happening together. And say, So I cannot give a lecture on both of them, so I'm going to focus on this. Rejoice always. Really? Is it true? Can you do it? How do you do it? These to-do lists are great reminders to all of us. Circumstances and feelings should not prevent Christians from rejoicing, giving thanks, showing a respect, acting kindly and patiently, and listening to all small voice of the Holy Spirit and avoiding evil. It's a very good recommendation applied to all of us. That's true. But think about it. When you adjust the God's way of thinking and relating to others, Because Jesus set the pattern, this is the key point I'm going in, for us to follow. Remember this key word. Suffering precedes glory, not the reverse. Okay? Glory doesn't come first. Suffering precedes glory means suffering first, then glory, not reverse. For the joy of keyword set before us, and then rejoice. God set the joy set before him, Jesus. He endured the cross and scorning its shame, the Hebrew 12:2. Because Jesus knew he has to go through, and he endured. He never take a sidewalk. We can rejoice in the midst of trial and suffering. How do you do it? Is it true? Can you really say hallelujah and rejoice when you have a tough time? It's a very good question. Jesus' suffering and resurrection have given us a joyful and joyful future for all who have been redeemed. It's called I call it now and then mindset. In other words, we suffer here, and then there's something which is waiting. Remember this two words, now and then. We have a suffering, persecutions, and challenges, trial now. But when you read the New Testament in detail, they always talk about then, in the future, here. Okay? The storyline goes all the way, all the way. The thing may not be, all the questions, all the prayer will not be answered here during lifetime. But when you look at long, in a grand scale, the long timeline, at the end, all the questions will be answered and all the prayer will be rewarded. That's the now and then concept. Very important. When you think about it, Jesus suffered and he endured the shame and died on the cross. It's now. But why did he do it? Because then he was resurrected and he ascended and he glorified and in heaven. We were here. We suffer trials, difficulty, persecution, and endure the shame here. Why? Then, in the future, we will be resurrected and meet Jesus in the air and be ascended. You see that? Now and then. Now and then. If you read I'll go quickly. Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord. Did it say rejoice in your car, rejoice in your property, rejoice in the money? No. He said rejoice in the Lord always. I will say again, rejoice. Remember, keyword. Rejoice or not rejoice is a choice. When you have a car wreck and you are in the midst of the trial, the challenge, and then also difficulty, you have two choices. Rejoice or not to rejoice. It's a choice. Yeah. Galatians 5:22. The fruit of the Spirit is, and it goes to the very famous, love, what's the next one? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Remember, joy is already as a part of the package of the fruits of the Spirit. And being filled with the Spirit is very good, and also the Spirit will cause us to rejoice. In other words, unless you have a fruit of Spirit inside of you, it's very difficult to say, rejoice in the midst of the trial. Romans 8:37 is very heartwarming to me. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure, this very famous verse, neither death nor life, nor angel nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height or depth, anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. Remember, rejoice always because what God has done for you and is doing for now for your salvation and will do in the future. No one nothing can take away your salvation. Acts 5:41. Then they left the presence of the council and they were persecuted, they're beaten up, and said, rejoicing, they were counted worthy to suffer dishonor for his name. Remember? Rejoice always, even in the persecution. Can you do it? Why? Because the apostle did it. Because they believed God's promise. When? Now or then? It's a then. It's in the future. Matthew 5:11. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you here, utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account here on the earth. But rejoice, be glad, for your reward is where? Here or there? It's then. Your reward will be great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And Nehemiah 8:10. Do not be grieved, do not be sad, do not be dismayed. For why are you able to do this? The joy of the Lord is your strength. Did he say the money is your strength, your property is your strength, or your car is your strength? No. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Know this. Remember, rejoice or not rejoice is a choice. Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. Didn't say for bad, for good. For those who are called according to his purpose. Qualifier. There are two important conditions, qualifiers. Number one, you love God. Number two, be called according to his purpose. Those are two qualifiers. For this, Romans 8:28 to apply. Romans 11:29, for the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. In other words, you cannot change. Once it's done, it's permanent. Revelation 22:1. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life. See, it's a very famous quote for me because I give a lecture on the water. And to me, that the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lambs, through the middle of the street of the city also, on either side of the river, the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruits. One day we will inhabit the New Jerusalem. That's heaven. It's here or there? No, it's there in heaven, New Jerusalem. We will see the Lord face to face. We will live in a perpetual day forever. Psalm 62:6. He only is my rock, my salvation. Think about this. Rock, something that will not move. Okay? God is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. What is the fortress? The fortress is someone to use hide inside so that the enemy cannot damage you. Lord is my rock, Lord is my salvation, Lord is my fortress. They're saying the same thing. I shall not be shaken. Connection here. See, rock, something very solid. Fortress, something to protect you. And salvation. Think about this war in the battlefield. I made this slide to give an illustration. What you focus upon or what you think about is extremely important in life. Okay? I'll give an example. People give an example, okay? And that's very famous. You have a glass of milk, okay? You can look and have. You can look at the top half. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. It's gone. Or you can look at the bottom of the half and say, oh, I still have a half of it. Half of the milk is there. Another way of saying the same thing. When you wake up, how many fingers do you have in your hand? Okay, unless you have amputation, you have 10 of them. When you start waking up in the morning and count, okay, I'm very grateful that I can walk. I'm grateful that I can breathe. I'm grateful that I can see. I'm grateful that I can hear. I'm grateful that I can go to the bathroom. I'm grateful that I can able to urinate. Why I'm saying this? I'm grateful that I can swallow. Why I'm saying this? Because I see the person who cannot do those things. Think about this one. When you wake up in the morning, okay, when you get from the bed to the bathroom, think about this one. I'm grateful that I can walk from point A to point B. Think about it. And then when you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you run out of the space and you use the toes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you have a 20 items that you can think of every day. Okay? So focus is very important. Think about, or what you focus on is very critical. And then think about the three things. What God has done for you in the past. What God is doing now, present. What God will do in the future. There's a past, present, and the future. Okay? Regardless of the circumstance feeling. Because if you're dependent upon how you feel it, okay, or circumstance, good or bad, if you depend upon those three things, you're on a wrong track. Okay? Think about this one. Regardless of the circumstance, good or bad, or regardless of your feeling, how you feel it, feeling, always have a hope. Look your eyes above, not below, okay? Always above. Hope in the Lord, for He is the rock, and He is our salvation, He is our fortress. When you think about it, when you come to this point, automatically what is the next logical step? Rejoice always. Did you get the point now? How you focus your eyes, where you put your focus, okay? Just like a milk of glass. You can look at the thing which is gone and say, oh, okay, complain all day long. Or you can look at the milk at the bottom and say, oh, I still have a half of it. And be very thankful, make the best out of it. If you have this concept, very important, think about and focus and be careful. What God has done in the past, what God is doing now, what God will do in the future, regardless of the circumstance feeling, it will generate the hope in the Lord, and then automatically He is the rock, fortress, and salvation, and that this lead you into the next stage. It's called rejoice. Rejoice always. Okay?
Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Rejoice, rejoice, and again I say rejoice. Rejoice, rejoice, and again I say rejoice. Rejoice.
One big question is this. There's a two-track. When everything in your way, no major problem, no trial, no persecution, no health problem, and no challenges, it's very easy to say, yes, rejoice always. It's very easy. But when the tide is turned around, when everything is not in your way, when you have a major health problem, you have trials, persecutions, you have cancers, and also hardships and death in the family, can you really say rejoice always? No, it's very hard. It's not easy. This is the reality. So next one, how do you rejoice in the midst of the trial, difficulty, persecution, and when you have a problem with the cancers and terminal illness? It's a very pertinent question to apply to all of you. How do you do it? Is it even possible? Sometimes we're not quite sure. So we have to study. So joy and rejoice very similar, so I'm going to skip this slide for the due to time constraint. How you process the events around you, what's happening in the world, is very important. Surrounding circumstance, right? It's called the world view. In other words, how you look at the world from your own eyes is called world view. It's a very big deal. How you interpret what is happening to you and to your circumstances is very important. Why? Because how you interpret the events, the surrounding, determines in what direction you go. Okay, let me give you an example. Helen Keller, and she lived in Alabama, in the next state, Alabama, and then we'll look at it. Okay.
Helen Keller dedicated her life to the betterment of others and labored tirelessly on behalf of the deaf and blind. As a lobbyist, fundraiser, speaker, world traveler, and dedicated champion of civil liberties, she did more to promote and secure equal treatment for those with disabilities than anyone before her or since. Helen was born with all of her senses intact on June 27, 1880 in Tuscumbia, Alabama. At 19 months, she suffered a severe bout of what is commonly believed to be scarlet fever, an infliction that dramatically changed her life.
Helen Keller was completely frustrated as a little girl, as any little girl would be who couldn't see, nor hear, nor communicate properly.
Her concerned parents sought out the advice and assistance of Dr. Alexander Graham Bell. It was through his intervention that Anne Sullivan entered Keller's life. Sullivan's job was to teach the 7-year-old Helen how to communicate, a daunting task when one considers Helen's circumstances.
One day, she takes Helen to the water pump, she gets the water running, she puts Helen's hand under the water, and then she simultaneously also signs water into Helen's hand, and Helen then learns the connection between the symbols that she is making into the child's hand and the word that it is. From then on, her vocabulary just expanded at a staggering rate. Anne was by far the most important thing in Helen Keller's life.
With Anne by her side, Helen connected with the world around her and learned quickly that many obstacles stood in her way as a deaf-blind person. She understood the need for an education if she was to prove wrong those who said that a disabled person, let alone a disabled woman, did not have much to contribute to society.
She chose Radcliffe College, as she said, because they didn't want me.
At Radcliffe, amazingly, she learned to understand French, German, Latin, Greek.
Helen graduated cum laude from Radcliffe in 1904 with a Bachelor of Arts and a keen desire to battle publicly for equality. Keller's success, in spite of her disability, inspired many, and she used this celebrity to promote a number of social causes.
Helen Keller.
During World War II, Helen made several cross-country trips to military hospitals, where she spent hours visiting patients and offering herself as a personal example to wounded soldiers. She wanted them to understand that they, like her, could lead a full life in spite of their new disabilities.
She really communicated the feeling that just because you no longer have your sight doesn't mean to say you're of no use to society. And she went around, and I have many examples in the archives at AFB of servicemen writing and saying how inspired they were by her visit and how it truly lifted their spirits, and they're wonderful letters.
Keller had a strong following throughout the world, and she traveled internationally to promote equality for the disabled. People of all nationalities were inspired by her message of determination and justice.
She traveled by the end of her days to 39 countries across the globe. She was the first major visitor to Japan after Japan had been bombed. She traveled to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. During that trip, 2 million people either lined the streets or came out and listened to her speak.
In Cairo,
The Presidential Medal of Freedom was the first woman to receive an honorary doctorate from Harvard and was named one of the 100 most influential people of the 20th century by Time magazine. Her passing on June 1, 1968, at her Arkin Ridge home in Fairfield County, marked the end of an illustrious lifetime dedicated to securing equal rights for the disabled.
she had a great concern for human beings, for the integrity of life, and for giving people the greatest opportunities that they could achieve.
Helen Keller was always fighting for the underdog. That's what she loved to do, and that's what she profoundly believed in.
Helen Keller always brought out the best in everyone.
Her lack of sight and hearing in no way diminished her relationship with everything around her and her ability to enjoy life. She truly enjoyed it.
With this illness, as I read the account, I think that she had it's called meningitis, the inflammation of the brain and the spinal cord, the brain. We call it meningococcus meningitis. As a result of the high fever and the meningitis, the nerve which comes from the brain to the eye, we call optic nerve, the optic nerve is damaged. As a result, all the image comes to the eye is no longer being transmitted into the brain. As a result, she cannot see. And because of this meningococcus meningitis, and then her nerve coming from the brain to the ear, which called the otic, O-T-I-C, otic nerve, was damaged. As a result, even the sound comes, she cannot interpret, she cannot hear. So it was a very challenge for the Helen Keller. And then one day, Miss Anne Sullivan was introduced into her life, and both worked very hard. And the famous story is Anne Sullivan took the Helen Keller to the pump, water pump. And then she ran the water, and the Helen Keller was touching the water. The cool water is running through. And then what the Anne Sullivan did, amazing thing to her. And this is the beginning of Helen Keller's story. She wrote W-A-T-E-R. What is it? Water. Okay? She wrote W-A-T-E-R, water, on Helen Keller's palm, right at the water pump. And then Helen, until then, she was never exposed what is the concept. That's the first time Helen Keller connect water, W-A-T-E-R, with the one which is running through the hand, through the palm of the hand. From this point, Anne Sullivan and also Helen Keller worked together. And Helen Keller, where did she go? She went to the Radcliffe College of where? It's Harvard University. She graduated with a high GPA, and she became a very prolific writer and also lecturer. So that's a brief story, and she made a huge contribution to those who were handicapped and then suffering. So that's the brief story of the Helen Keller. And question. She wrote something very important question. Keep your face to the sunshine, and you cannot see the shadow. You know what it means? Okay? Here's the sun. You're here. When you're facing the sun, okay, what do you see? You see the sun. Okay? But when you see the sun facing this way, you don't see the shadow. But when you turn 180 degrees this way, now sun is here, you're here. But what do you see? You see the shadow. What? Okay? Very fundamental question. What is the sunshine signify? I wrote down, this is Namihira's version. Hope, encouragement, push forward, and progress. Okay? When you face it. And it's a positive thinking, we call it a positive attitude when, in the midst of the difficulty. But when you turn around, when you see the shadow, what does the shadow signify? It's a disappointment, depression, dark side, negative thinking, negative attitude. This is what the quote from Helen Keller, and said, that's quite a very profound for me to think about it. So Helen Keller mentioned this way, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. See? Not everything, but I can do something. I will not refuse to do something I can do. Very inspiring, the lady. So the why I'm showing this one, I'm from Japan. And where those so small children, they're from Japan. At the time of World War II, Japan was devastated and going through a tough time. Where did she go? Helen Keller went to Japan. Think about it. Helen Keller went to Japan, gave the speech, the lecture and the speech, and then she inspired many, many people, including school children. Yeah. And then this is the, think about this, 2 Corinthians 4:16. She quoted this verse everywhere she went to the lecture. What did she say? Remember, Helen Keller has two problems. Eye cannot see. She's blind. Ear, she cannot hear. Okay? But this is what she said. She quoted this verse everywhere she went at the end of her lecture and said, the things that you're seeing are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. I'll paraphrase. What you see with your eyes, neckties and then clothes and the cars and the house, everything is a transient. On the other hand, but the things that you cannot see with your eyes is eternal. What are those? Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, kindness, and then self-control. These spiritual aspects is the one which is eternal, transient and eternal. And remember the context. Helen Keller, who cannot see with your own eyes, is quoted this Bible verse everywhere. She went to give a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, she quoted this one. It's a very profound for us to think about it. Okay? Just what is visible with the eye is transient, but what you cannot see with your eyes, something spiritual matter, is eternal. Okay? So how did you rejoice in the midst of the trial, which is a very pertinent question. And the worldly joy and happiness, I will just skip because the time is running. Hebrews 12:1 says, therefore we are surrounded by the so great cloud of witness. Let us lay aside every weight, the sin, which is so easily ensnares us. Let us run, keyword, with endurance, the race that is set before us, keyword. Looking unto Jesus, keyword, the author and finisher of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and had sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Think about it. We and Jesus. We lay aside every weight of sin, run with the endurance. The race is a long distance run. It's a marathon, not short distance run. What is set before us, we do not have it now. See, now and then. We don't have it now, but we'll get it later, which is a then. Looking unto whom? Jesus. Not many other objects. Sharp focus on Jesus. That's our part of it. What is Jesus doing? Jesus is the author and the finisher of what? Our faith. That's the key word. That's the key to. And it's a link to the God's promise. And that's the final product, the gift for us, is the presence of God. This is set before him, Jesus, of what? That's why he endured what? He endured the cross. What is the cross? Cross is a shame. Okay? It's not something that you glorify. The cross is a shame. But he sat down at the right hand of whom? Of God in the end. You see that? Now and then. Now and then. Okay? Hebrews 10. For we had compassion on me in my chains. This is the Paul speaking. Hebrews 10:34. For you have compassion on me, and me means Paul, in my chains, joyfully accepted the plundering of your goods, knowing that you have a better and enduring possession for yourself. Where? Here or there? In heaven, which is there. Therefore, do not cast away your confidence, which has great reward, for you have a need of endurance, so that after you have done the will of God here, you may receive where? The promise here. Now and then. So this is a summary. Plundering of your goods is a personal property confiscation, hardship, difficulty. Where? Now. Why? Knowing what? Better and enduring possession in heaven. But it's then. Endurance, keep on moving, receive the God's promise here, then. The presence of God, where? Now? No. The presence of God in the midst of the trial, difficulty, hardships, here on earth. Okay? Now, always now and then. I've already wrongly arrested. Think about it. He had enough reason for complaint and protest. But he chose not to take that route. What did he do? He was content with whatever material blessing he had, and he was contentment. He was shipwrecked on the way to Rome, but his reliance on the power of God was amazing. God knows what he's doing, and he trusts, confidence 100%, not 95%, 100%, and he had a peace of mind. Child trusts their parents 100%. The children go to bed, not worry about where the breakfast is coming in the morning. They go to sleep, okay? Because they have a 100% confidence in the parents. And then Apostle Paul was bitten by a snake, had a damage, bitten by a snake, but he relied on the power of God. Okay, but no. What is the next thing you find out? You become anxious of everything. You become anxiety, worry, and insomnia and depression. That's the consequence. But if you just leave this alone and say, I will rely on God, and all of a sudden, anxiety, worry, and insomnia will go away. Why? Because you are not responsible for it. Does that make sense? When you try to take all the responsibility yourself, then you end up with anxiety, worries, insomnia, depression. Okay? And then life under the Apostle Paul was under house arrest for 2 years, and this is a key word. Apostle Paul deliberately chose to focus on something positive. Most of the material written in the New Testament, where do you think that Paul wrote? Is it in a gorgeous in a house, or in a freedom? No. The most of the Apostle Paul's epistle were written in prison. So he had a deliberate choice to focus on positive, not negative thing. And he changed. Once you make a choice, I'm going to focus on this, not on this one, okay, on the positive side, automatically what's going to happen? It changes your mood. And I thought about it. I can explain to you what happened. Once you make a decision, I'm going to take this route instead of this route, amazing thing happened. The brain secretes something very amazing chemical called endorphin, E-N-D-O, endorphin. That's a happy hormone, and the happy hormone is the one change the mood instantaneously. Yeah, it's amazing. So, question. Where do you find the joy? In the absence of difficulty? Are you looking for a perfect world? No. We live in an imperfect world. So answer is, where do you find the joy? In the absence of difficulty? No. Does the absence of difficulty, meaning everything is perfect, okay? Does the absence of difficulty brings about the joy automatically? Answer is no. Then where do you find the joy? This is the punchline I want to make on this slide. It's in the presence of Christ and God. So that's the punchline. So take home points. When you have accident, think about this scenario. You're walking above the ground, not buried under the ground. Circumstances and feelings should not prevent Christians from rejoicing and giving thanks. Suffering comes first, and then glory. Okay? Next, the worldview is a choice. Keep your face to the sunshine, and you cannot see the shadows. Race set before us, and looking unto Jesus at the cross. You cannot rejoice in the things of the world, but rejoice always in what? In the Lord. Okay? The food for thought. This is a quotation from Acts of Apostle, page 210. It is our privilege to glory in the cross. It is our privilege to give ourselves wholly in 100% to Him who gave Himself for us. Then, with the light that streamed from the Calvary shining in our faces, we may go forth to reveal this light coming from the cross, this light to those in darkness. Did you get to this scenario? When you look the sun, okay, you don't see the shadow. But when you turn around this way, now you're beginning to see the shadow. When you see the Christ, do you see the shadow? No. Okay? Always keep your focus. That's the important point. So this quotation came from the Acts of Apostles AA 2:10. So thank you very much. And this is the end of my presentation.